They referred to her as a mouse. They teased her for her stillness, her shaking hands when she poured coffee, and the way she reacted to loud noises. Audrey Hale, a 40-year-old rookie who was washed up and didn't fit in Oak Creek Memorial's elite emergency room, was seen by the staff as a diversity appointment. Head nurse Brenda giggled when Audrey dropped a tray. When she double-cheated on a chart, Dr. Harrison rolled his eyes. They believed they knew her, but they were unaware that the shaking wasn't due to fear. It was self-control. They didn't realize that under her scrub top were scars from locations that don't exist on maps. Furthermore, they had no idea that the Black Hawk chopper that was currently screaming in the direction of their helipad wasn't arriving to pick up a patient. It was on its way to her. The sound of the fluorescent lights in the emergency room at Oak Creek Memorial frequently caused Audrey Hale a headache. It was 7 p.m. The graveyard shift began on a wet Tuesday in November. Holding a clipboard to her chest like a shield, Audrey stood by the nurse's station. At 42, she was older than the majority of the young nursing graduates who hurried through the emergency room in their form-fitting blue uniforms. Regardless of the heat, Audrey always wore a long-sleeved white undershirt, and her scrubs were always a size too big, flowing loosely over her body. Heads up, mouse is in the way again. A shrill voice interrupted the background chatter of ringing phones and cardiac monitors. Audrey moved quickly, possibly too quickly, and almost ran into a crash cart. The charge nurse, Brenda, grinned as she walked by. Brenda was 35, had sharp features, and commanded the ER with a terrible blend of expertise and brutality. 3 months prior, on Audrey's first day, she had determined that the older woman was worthless. "Sorry, Brenda," Audrey whispered, her eyes locked on the linoleum floor. "Audrey, don't apologize. Just be competent," Brenda snapped, not breaking stride. "A new bedpan is needed for bed number 4. This time, try not to drop it. Dr. Harrison is in a mood, and if you screw up his flow, I'm writing you up again." Audrey nodded and scurried off. She heard the younger nurses gathered by the computer terminals snickering as she left. One mumbled loud enough to be heard, "I don't know why AHA hired her. She trembles. Have you looked at her hands? She can barely hold an IV catheter. She poses a risk." Another said, "She's on probation. Give it 2 weeks. She will return to her job at a nursing home, where she belongs." After Harrison chews her up and spits her out. After swallowing the lump in her throat, Audrey moved the bed curtain back. She wasn't trembling because she was anxious. She was shivering because the adrenaline at this civilian hospital seemed weird. It was both too slow and too chaotic. The egos were larger than the stakes. For the past 15 years of her life, she had worked in settings where being competent didn't depend on having the whitest teeth or the sharpest insults. It was about maintaining bodily fluids while the earth erupted all around you. But she couldn't talk about that. The non-disclosure agreements she had signed with the Department of Defense were thicker than the medical volumes on Dr. Harrison's desk. To them, she was just Audrey Hale, the late blossoming nurse with no references previous to 2023. Dr. Trent Harrison yelled, "Nurse!" from Trauma Bay 1. Audrey froze. Instinct prompted her to move since he was shouting, but he wasn't addressing her by name. She rushed over to the bay. The golden boy of the hospital was Dr. Harrison, unquestionably talented, tall, and rather jaggedly attractive. To his genius, the nurses were like handmaidens. Right now he was suturing a cut on the forearm of a construction worker. "I require 4. Not a single nylon. Not 3. Nothing." Harrison gave a bark, hurling the bundle to the ground. This cart was stocked by whom? "Hale, was that you?" Audrey examined the cart. She hadn't stocked it. It was the day shift. "Doctor, I understand. Don't get it. It ought to be here." He glared at her through his mask, sneering. "God, you resemble a deer caught in headlights. Are you merely here to be paid and get in the way, or do you even understand what a suture is?" Audrey's hand quivered. A man who spoke to her in that manner in a different life would have been zip-tied and subdued in 3 seconds. However, Audrey inhaled. This employment was necessary for her. The pension was necessary for her. She needed the peaceful life she had promised her late spouse. "I'll get the 4-0, doctor," she whispered quietly. "While you're at it, hurry and grab me some coffee. 2 black sugars. You might be able to handle that without murdering anyone." The hallway erupted in laughter. Brenda was watching, arms crossed, enjoying the show. Audrey went to get the coffee and the suture kit. Her palm shook as she gave Harrison the cup. This was a natural reaction to repressed anger, rather than fear. A few droplets of hot coffee sloshed over the rim and spilled on Harrison's pristine white sneaker. The ER went silent. Harrison looked down at his sneaker. then up at Audrey. His face flushed. "Get out," he growled. "Doctor, get out of my trauma bay," I said. Audrey carefully and precisely placed the suture kit on the tray, saying, "You are clumsy. You are incompetent, and you are a danger to this department. Go clean bedpans until I decide if I'm firing you tonight." This time, she didn't apologize. She simply turned and left. The sound of Harrison cursing as he trailed her down the corridor. As she reached the break room, she glimpsed her reflection in the glass door. Yes, the grey eyes staring back were worn, but they weren't mouse eyes. They were the eyes of a wolf compelled to dwell among sheep, anticipating the time when the costume would have to be removed. That moment was less than an hour away, even though she was unaware of it at the time. The shift dragged on. Outside, the rain had turned into a furious downpour beating against the ambulance bay doors. The barometric pressure was decreasing, and anyone who worked in emergency treatment understood that storms brought the turmoil. Paramedics stormed through the double doors around 9:15 p.m., wheeling in a rain-soaked stretcher. Male, mid-50s, found unresponsive in his car on the highway. The paramedic yelled. "BP is 80/50, with tachycardia at 130. We've got him on a monitor. He has no visible injuries, although he is pale and diaphoretic." "Trauma 1. Harrison screamed, inspired by a key case. "Brenda, get an IV. Let's get going." Audrey was standing close to the supply closet in the backdrop, technically exiled by Harrison, but she monitored the monitor like a hawk. She studied the patient, a heavily set man named Mr. Kowalski. Dr. Harrison started his evaluation. Listen to their lungs. The sounds of breathing are audible. The abdomen is soft. A myocardial infarction is most likely the cause. Let's prepare the cath lab and obtain a 12-lead EGG. Brenda was having trouble using the IV. Mr. Kowalski's veins were collapsed. "Doctor, I can't get a stick. Keep trying." Harrison lost his temper. "He's going to crash." Audrey took a step forward. She had stopped staring at the monitor. She was gazing at the patient's neck, notably the way the veins were distended. She examined his trachea. It was slightly to the left, but it was barely noticeable to the untrained eye. She glanced at the monitor. The oxygen saturation was decreasing despite the high-flow mask. 88% and 85%. Audrey's voice pierced through the cacophony. "Doctor." It wasn't the quiet murmur she typically employed. It was stiff. Harrison disregarded her. "That egg, where is it?" "Dr. Harrison," Audrey said loudly. "It's not a heart attack. Examine the JVD. Look at the tracheal deviation." Harrison ripped his stethoscope from his ears and whirled around. "I believe I told you to get out of my path. I am treating a huge MI here." "It's not an MI," Audrey argued, moving into the trauma bay. "It's a pneumothorax of tension. His lung has collapsed and is crushing his heart. If you send him to the cath lab, he'll perish on the elevator. Now you must release the tension in his chest." The room fell silent. Brenda's jaw dropped. It was unimaginable that the mouse would correct the star attending physician. Harrison moved into Audrey's personal space, intimidating her with his height. "You are a probationary nurse with 0 critical care experience. I'll have security remove you if you open your mouth once more. This man exhibits typical signs of a heart attack." He faced the patient once more. "Get him to the cath lab. Move." Audrey stood her ground. Her heart wasn't pounding. There was no trembling in her hands. A chilly serenity had enveloped her. The combat mind is gaining control. She gazed at the patient. Mr. Kowalski was rolling his eyes. His blood pressure fell to 60 over the palpation. He is a programmer. Brenda let out a cry. No pulse. Start compressions. At last, panic crept into Harrison's voice as he yelled, "Epi, get Epi for me." They began performing CPR. Pulseless electrical activity, or PA, was the rhythm seen on the monitor. The heart was attempting to beat, but it was literally stopped by something. Audrey didn't request authorization. She didn't hold off. She proceeded by Brenda, got a 14-gauge angioarth needle from the crash cart, and moved to the patient's right side. "What are you doing?" Harrison yelled, grasping for her arm. "Keep your hands off of him." Audrey batted his hand away with a block so rapid and fierce that Harrison stumbled back into the wall. Before anybody could respond, she palpated the second intercostal area on Mr. Kowalski's chest mid-clavicular line and plunged the needle deep into the chest cavity. Hiss. The sound was audible even over the pandemonium. With a high-pitched whistle, trapped air rushed out of the needle. Almost instantly, the monitor beeped. The sinus beat came back. The blood pressure shot up to 110/70. Mr. Kowalski gasped, drawing in a large gulp of air. With a blank expression, Audrey taped the catheter in place and took a step back. "Tension pneumothorax," she stated resolutely. The space was frozen. Brenda, the paramedics, and the other nurses gazed at Audrey as though she had just acquired wings. With a shocked and humiliated expression on his face, Dr. Harrison stood against the wall and rubbed the spot on his wrist where she had prevented him. "Harrison stumbled you. You just carried out an unauthorized medical treatment. That's assault. That is practicing medicine without a license." "I saved his life," Audrey said, looking him in the eye. "You were treating a heart attack as he suffocated." Harrison's voice trembled with anger as he said, "Get out. You are fired. Leave my hospital right now. I'll see to it you never work in healthcare again. Brenda, call security." Harrison roared. Audrey looked at the patient, who was now pink and breathing. She had done her job. She unclipped her badge, placed it on the crash cart, and turned to leave. "You don't have to call security," Audrey said quietly. "I'm leaving." She walked out of the trauma bay, the silence heavy behind her. She had saved a life, and it had cost her the only normally she had left. Audrey sat on a bench outside the ambulance bay, the rain soaking her scrubs. She held a cardboard box with a few meager possessions: a stethoscope, a mug, and a framed photo of a golden retriever. She checked her watch. 10 p.m. She had been fired for less than 20 minutes. She should go home. She should cry. But she just felt tired. She took out her phone to call a taxi. Suddenly, the air shifted. It wasn't just the wind. It was a vibration that rattled her teeth. A low thumping bass that she felt in her sternum before she heard it. Thump, 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 thump. Audrey froze. She knew that sound. It was the specific heavy chop of a Sawsky rotary engine, but not a medevac bird. Medevac choppers wed. This was a growl. She looked up at the stormy sky. Through the driving rain, lights appeared. Not the standard red and white of a civilian ambulance chopper. These were formation lights. 3 helicopters flying low, fast. The lead helicopter banked hard, ignoring the standard flight path for the hospital helipad. Coming in aggressive and steep. It was a massive MH-60 Black Hawk painted matte black with no visible registration numbers on the side. Inside the ER, chaos erupted. "We have an unauthorized inbound aircraft." The receptionist screamed over the intercom. "They aren't responding to radio hail. They are landing on the pad." Dr. Harrison and Brenda ran to the ambulance bay doors, looking out into the rain. "Who is that?" Harrison yelled. "Police." The Black Hawk touched down on the wet asphalt of the helipad with a force that shook the building. The rotors didn't spin down. They stayed at full combat speed, whipping rain into a frenzy. The side door of the helicopter slid open. 4 men jumped out. They weren't paramedics. They were clad in full tactical gear, multicam uniforms, night vision goggles mounted on helmets, sidearms strapped to their thighs. But the man in the center wasn't carrying a weapon. He was carrying a portable trauma stretcher, shouting orders into a headset. They sprinted toward the ER doors, moving with a terrifying fluid precision. Harrison stepped forward, trying to regain his authority. "Hey, you can't just land here. This is a private." The lead soldier, a giant of a man with a beard and a scar running down his cheek, didn't even slow down. He stiff-armed the automatic doors open. "We need a trauma bay now," the soldier roared. His voice was gravel and command. "We have a VIP code black. Multiple gunshot wounds. Hemorrhage is uncontrolled. Bring him to Trauma 1. "Oh," Harrison said, his eyes widening at the sight of the blood-soaked figure on the stretcher. "I'm the attending." The soldiers rushed the patient past the stunned nurses. As they transferred the man onto the hospital bed, the lead soldier grabbed Harrison by the scrub top. "Listen to me." The soldier growled. "This man is a United States senator and a former admiral. If he dies, this whole hospital burns. Do you understand?" Harrison swallowed hard. I can handle it. I'm the best surgeon here. You better be." The soldier spat. Harrison looked at the wounds. It was a disaster. 3 shots to the abdomen, 1 to the upper thigh. The femoral artery was nicked. "Brenda, get typo negative. Start 2 large bore lines. Call the O." Harrison's hands were shaking. This wasn't a car accident. This was combat trauma. The damage was catastrophic. The monitors screamed. The Admiral's pressure was 50/30ths. "I can't stop the bleeding," Harrison yelled, packing gauze into the wound. "It's too deep. He's going to code." The lead soldier, whose name patch read Commander Vance, said, "No, wait. Vance is outlawed." Commander Rivers narrowed his eyes as he observed Harrison's distress. "He's leaving you," Rivers yelled. "I'm doing my hardest." Harrison let out a cry. "The extent of the destruction is too great. A vascular surgeon is what I need. We don't have time to hire an expert." River punched the counter with his fist. He gazed around the room, his eyes scanning the horrified expressions of the nurses. He looked at Brenda, who was fumbling with the blood bags. He stared at the young occupants, freezing in the corner. "Is this it?" Rivers screamed. "Is this your best option?" Harrison shouted back. "I am the chief resident." Rivers swore into his radio. "This is Viking 1 base. Local assets are failing. The bundle is essential. A military complex has to be cleaned up. Negative. Viking 1. The radio responded with a crackle. "Package will not survive transport. On the spot, you must stabilize." Rivers appeared hopeless. He saw his mentor bleeding out on a table in a civilian hospital under the supervision of a hyperventilating doctor. Rivers then reached for a nurse. Rivers growled, "Brenda, where is she?" Brenda shuddered. "Who?" "The asset," replied Rivers. "We tracked the signal here. The Doody database said she works at this location. We didn't come to this hospital by accident. We came because she is here." "Who?" Harrison asked, looking up from the blood. "Call sign Wraith," Rivers said in tense urgency. "Real name Lieutenant Commander Audrey Hale." "Where is she?" Harrison and Brenda froze. The color drained from Brenda's face. "Audrey," Brenda whispered. The mouse. Mouse? Rivers looked like he was about to snap Brenda's neck. She is the finest trauma nurse the Navy SEALs ever had. She pioneered field vascular repair under fire in Syria. She is the only person on this continent who can fix this mess in 5 minutes. Rivers looked around the room. "Where is she?" Brenda pointed a shaking finger towards the sliding glass doors. Dr. Harrison just fired her." She left. Rivers' face went pale. He keyed his radio. "Team 2. Secure the perimeter. Find the woman. If she left the property, get the bird back in the air and find her." But they didn't have to look far. The automatic doors slid open. Audrey stood there. She had seen the Black Hawk. She had recognized the tail number. She had seen the unit patch on River's shoulder through the glass. She dropped her box of belongings on the floor. The glass of the picture frame shattered. She walked into the room. Her posture was different now. The slump was gone. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was up. She walked with a predator's grace, closing the distance to the trauma bay in seconds. She looked at Rivers. "Commander," she said, her voice steel. Rivers looked at her with pure relief. "Wraith, thank God." "It's Admiral Graham." "Gutshot. Femoral nick. This clown can't find the bleeder." Audrey didn't look at Harrison. She didn't look at Brenda. She walked straight to the sink, ripped open a scrub brush, and scrubbed her hands in 10 seconds flat. She grabbed a sterile gown and gloves, snapping them on with a sharp thack. She stepped up to the table, physically hip-checking Dr. Harrison out of the way. "Step aside, Trent," she said. It was the first time she had used his first name. "Class is in session." She looked down at the open wound. She didn't see blood and gore. She saw a puzzle she had solved 1,000 times in the back of Chinooks and in muddy ditches. "Rivers," Audrey barked. "Get me a vascular clamp and a 2-proline. Brenda, stop shaking and hang that blood. If you drop it, I will have Rivers throw you out of the helicopter." She reached into the abdominal cavity, her hands moving so fast they were a blur. "Suction," she commanded. Harrison stood against the wall, his mouth agape, watching the incompetent nurse take command of a squad of Special Forces operators and his entire ER. Audrey looked up, her grey eyes locking onto the monitor. "Let's get to work," she whispered. The trauma bay had transformed into a theatre of war, and Audrey Hale was the general. The air was thick with the copper scent of blood and the sharp tang of antiseptic. The beeping of the cardiac monitor was the only metronome keeping time in a room where seconds meant the difference between a funeral and a recovery. Dr. Trent Harrison stood pressed against the back wall, his face a mask of pale shock. He watched the woman he had ridiculed for 3 months, the woman he had called clumsy, move with a terrifying mechanical efficiency. "Give me the vascular clamps curved now," Audrey ordered. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a frequency of command that made people obey without thinking. Brenda, the charge nurse, who had spent weeks making Audrey's life miserable, fumbled with the sterile tray. Her hands were shaking so badly, the metal instruments clattered together like chattering teeth. "I can't find the curved one," Brenda stammered, tears of panic welling in her eyes. "Move," Audrey said. She didn't look up. She reached blindly onto the tray, her fingers identifying the instrument by touch alone, and snapped it up. "Suction the retroperitoneal space," Audrey commanded. "I can't see the source." A young resident, terrified but eager, stepped in with the suction tip. The pool of dark red blood cleared, revealing the devastation inside Admiral Graham's abdomen. "My God," Harrison whispered from the wall. "The aorta is nicked. In 30 seconds, he will bleed out. You can't solve that here. He needs a bypass machine. He needs a fully prepared O." "He doesn't have 30 seconds to get to an O," Audrey said, focusing on the large vessel's tear. "Rivers, hold pressure here. Hold on tight." Commander Rivers came up to the table. Killing trained, the huge Navy SEAL obeyed the nurse's commands without question. He extended his gloved hands into the exposed opening and applied pressure where she indicated. "Harrison is right about one thing," Audrey whispered, her brow furrowed in concentration. "We can't repair this with standard flow. I have to cross-clamp the aorta. We're cutting off blood to his lower body. We have 20 minutes before his kidneys die." "Mark time." "Mark," Rivers said, 224 hours. Audrey took a deep breath. In her mind, the walls of Oak Creek Memorial dissolved. She wasn't in a suburban hospital anymore. She was back in a dusty tent in the Coringal Valley. Mortars shaking the ground, working on a Marine sergeant with half his chest missing. The battle mind was fully engaged. The tremor in her hands, the one the staff had mocked, was gone completely. Her hands were as steady as stone. 40 proline, double-armed, she requested. She began to suture. It was a masterclass in surgical technique. She wasn't just stitching. She was repairing the vessel wall of the biggest artery in the human body, working in a hole filled with blood with limited lighting. Harrison couldn't help himself. He crept closer, gazing over Rivers's shoulder. He anticipated seeing a massacre. His breath caught at what he saw. Her knots were flawless. Her spacing was mathematically accurate. She moved the needle with a smoothness he had never seen in textbooks or from the oldest, most legendary surgeons at Mayo Clinic. "How?" Harrison muttered. "How are you doing that?" "You're just a nurse," Audrey yelled, retractor, dismissing him. "I'm going to intubate you next, Brenda, if you don't stabilize that blood pressure. Push one more ONG unit." "Squeeze the bag," Brenda exclaimed. "The pressure is 70/40. He continues to crash." "Calmly," Audrey remarked. "He's dry." "Rivers, give me your blood." The room stopped. "What?" Brenda inquired. "Whole blood transfusion. Protocol for walking blood banks?" Audrey said, not interrupting her stitching. "O negative is the Admiral. Rivers, you're O negative. 3 years ago I examined your medical jacket. Hook him up." Harrison stepped forward once more and said, "You can't do that. That's against every hospital protocol. You haven't screened him for HIV, hepatitis, or anything. You're breaking the law." Audrey finally looked up. Her grey eyes bored into Harrison like drill bits. "Protocol is for peacetime, doctor. This man is dying." "River, sit." "Brenda, draw a line from River's antecubital vein and run it directless into the Admiral's central line." "Do it." River sat on a stool next to the bed, rolling up his sleeve. "Do it, Brenda. Or I'll have a talk with you about obstruction of justice." Brenda scrambled to comply. Within minutes, fresh, warm, oxygenated blood was flowing from the special operator directly into the dying Admiral. The monitor began to change. The frantic beep-beep-beep slowed. The tone deepened. Pressure rising, the resident called out. 90/60. 95/65. Audrey tied the final knot on the aorta, unclamping in 3, 2, 1. She released the clamp. Everyone held their breath. If the stitches didn't hold, the Admiral would die instantly. The vessel pulsed. The stitches held. Not a drop leaked. Audrey exhaled. A long, slow sound. She checked the other wounds. The thigh, the gut, minor compared to the aorta. She packed them quickly. "He's stable," she announced, peeling off her blood-soaked gloves. "Get him to the ICU. Keep him sedated. I want hourly checks on his pedal pulses." She stepped back from the table. The adrenaline that had sustained her suddenly vanished, leaving her knees weak. She leaned against the crash cart. The room was silent. The nurses, the techs, the residents, they were all staring at her. It wasn't the look of mockery they had given her earlier. It was awe. It was fear. Harrison stared at the closed incision on the Admiral's abdomen. He knew, medically speaking, that what she had just done was impossible. "Who are you?" Harrison whispered, his voice trembling. Audrey didn't answer. She walked over to the sink and began to wash the blood of a hero off her hands. But the night wasn't over. The doors to the ER burst open again. This time, it wasn't a patient. It was the hospital's CEO, Mr. Sterling. Wait, Sterling is banned. Let's use Mr. Caldwell, accompanied by 2 police officers and the head of hospital security. What is going on here? Caldwell bellowed, his face red. I have reports of a military invasion in my ER, unauthorized surgery, and staff being threatened. Who is in charge? Harrison straightened up. This was his chance. He could spin this. He could save his career. He pointed a shaking finger at Audrey. She is Harrison shouted. That nurse. I fired her hours ago for incompetence. She broke into the trauma bay, assaulted me, practiced medicine without a license, and performed an illegal blood transfusion. Arrest her. The police officers moved toward Audrey, hands on their holsters. Audrey didn't run. She didn't hide. She grabbed a paper towel, dried her hands, and turned to face them. I wouldn't do that if I were you. A deep voice rumbled. Commander Rivers stepped between the police and Audrey. He was still hooked up to the IV line, running to the Admiral, but he looked ready to fight the entire room. Officer, Rivers said calmly, if you touch her, you will be violating the United States Espionage Act and interfering with a Tier 1 federal asset. The cops hesitated. She's a nurse. Harrison shrieked. She's a nobody. Look at her. She's the mouse. Audrey stepped out from behind Rivers. She looked at Harrison, then at Caldwell. She reached into her scrub pocket and pulled out something she hadn't worn in 3 years. It wasn't a badge. It was a set of dog tags taped together to keep them silent. She threw them on the metal tray in front of Harrison. They clattered loudly. Read them, she said softly. Harrison picked them up. He squinted at the embossed metal. Hail Audrey LLCDR. USN 0098744421N0 LCDR. Harrison frowned. Lieutenant Commander, that's right, Rivers said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. And you just tried to have a senior naval officer arrested after she saved a 3-star admiral's life. Harrison dropped the tags as if they were hot coals. The revelation hung in the air like smoke. Lieutenant Commander, in the hospital hierarchy, a nurse was subordinate to a doctor. But in the world that had just kicked down the doors of Oak Creek Memorial, Audrey Hale outranked everyone in the room. Mr. Caldwell, the CEO, was a businessman, but he wasn't stupid. He looked at the Black Hawk helicopter spinning outside, the armed soldiers securing the hallway, and the sheer terror on Dr. Harrison's face. Doctor, explain to me why you fired a lieutenant commander from my hospital, Harrison, Caldwell replied slowly. I didn't know, Harrison stumbled, perspiration trickling down his brow. She never said anything. She behaved like a frightened young child. Trays were dropped by her. Basic triage was beyond her capabilities. Audrey took a step forward. The silence of the room magnified her footfall. Trent, I didn't act like a scared girl, she remarked. Her voice was unrecognizable to them now. It was the voice of a woman who had questioned rebels. I pretended to be a person with severe PTSD attempting to reintegrate into society. I pretended to be someone who wished to forget what I had witnessed. She turned to face the other nurses who had made fun of her. Brenda appeared to be on the verge of throwing up. I dropped the tray last week because a car backfired in the parking lot, Audrey replied, her gaze moving over them. To you it was a noise. To me it was a sniper shot in Fallujah that took off my best friend's head. A gasp ran through the crowd, not because I didn't know how to insert a vein, but rather because I was hesitant about the IVs. She continued, holding out her hands. They were stable today, but for the previous 10 years, every time I inserted a vein, it was on a youngster who was dying in the mud and wailing for his mother. I came here to find tranquility. I come here to heal people without the gunshots. She looked back at Harrison and said, and you turned it into a battlefield. You're being harassed. You're belittled. You treated this squad like your own servants. Because your ego outweighs your diagnostic abilities, you nearly killed Mr. Kowalski tonight. Harrison's cheeks turned red. I graduated from Yale. The best surgeon in this hospital is me. You're a butcher with a diploma, Audrey replied coldly. Mr. Kowalski had a tension pneumothorax. It would have been obvious to a First Earth doctor. You missed it because you were too busy yelling at me to get your coffee. Harrison shouted, that's slander, turning to Caldwell for encouragement. Sir? Are you going to allow her to talk to me like this? Caldwell turned to face the Admiral, whom the military team was now loading onto a transport gurney. He gazed at the remarkable sewing on the man's abdomen. In fact, I'd want to hear what she has to say, Caldwell remarked in a cold tone. Commander Rivers, Audrey said, turning to the SEAL. What is the Admiral's current situation? Stable, ma'am. Walter Reed is receiving dust-off. He's going to make it. Excellent. Audrey gave a nod. She reached up and untied her scrub cap, letting her hair fall. After removing the bloody gown, she tossed it in the biohazard container. Mr. Caldwell. Audrey addressed the CEO. I resign. Caldwell stepped forward and said, No. Wait. With desperation in his voice. Lieutenant Commander Audrey, let's make this right. We can talk about getting promoted. Head of nursing. Anything you desire. We didn't know. That's the problem, isn't it? Sadly, Audrey said. You shouldn't need to know someone's rank to treat them with fundamental human dignity. For 3 months, you witnessed Harrison harass me. You observed Brenda intimidating the new employees. You allowed a culture of cruelty because it was profitable. She picked up her luggage and went to the nurses' station. She declared, I'm done hiding. Where are you heading? In a scarcely audible whisper, Brenda asked. At the door, Audrey hesitated. Outside, the rain had ceased. As they prepared for flight, the Black Hawk engines began to whine. Home, Audrey said. To pack. For what purpose should you pack? In an attempt to reclaim some semblance of superiority, Harrison sneered. After you went away to play nurse in the suburbs, do you think the Navy will accept you back? Rivers intervened and gave Audrey a headset. Doctor, she didn't go a wall, Rivers remarked with a smile. As of tomorrow at 0900 hours, her medical leave has been revoked. Rivers saluted Audrey as he turned to face her. It wasn't a light-hearted salute. It was crisp, courteous, and sharp. The Pentagon issued orders. They need you back, Mum. There's a specific medical training unit being established up in San Diego. They need a co. Audrey glanced at the headset before turning back to the emergency room, which had served as her 90-day incarceration. Harrison, little and petty in his white coat, caught her attention. Audrey said, San Diego sounds nice. She donned the headset. Harrison yelled, Wait, as she made her way to the helicopter. You can't just leave. You assaulted me. I'll file a lawsuit. Your license will be with me. On the tarmac, Audrey came to a stop. Her hair was whipped about her face by the rotor wash. She made one final turn back. Over the din of the engines, she cried out to Harrison. What? He responded with a shout. Check your shoes. Harrison cast a downward glance. The Admiral's blood was dark scarlet on his immaculate white Nikes. She responded. You'll never get that stain out. And you'll never forget tonight. Every time you yell at a nurse, every time you believe you're a god, you're going to remember the mouse who saved the patient you couldn't. She climbed into the Black Hawk. After her, Rivers leaped in and closed the door. Oak Creek Memorial and its shocked employees were left far below in the dark as the helicopter took off, banking sharply into the night sky. The wind from the rotor wash stung Harrison's eyes as he stood in the ambulance bay. He glanced down at his shoes, which were covered in blood. She was correct. Even though he attempted to remove it with a towel, it was not emerging. Doc Harrison, Caldwell murmured as he approached from behind. Harrison mumbled, She's crazy. Good riddance. Caldwell muttered, Pack your things, Trent. Harrison froze. What? You missed attention, pneumothorax. You antagonized a federal asset, and you nearly allowed a U.S. senator die in my ER. Caldwell had a harsh voice. While an investigation is conducted, you are suspended. To be honest, I don't think you'll return. Harrison observed the helicopter's red tail lights disappear into the night sky. He was alone. However, the tail didn't stop there. Because Audrey Hale had left something behind when she left the hospital. A legacy? No. Something far more perilous to Oak Creek Memorial's secrets. Inside her locker, which Brenda was presently cleaning out, sat a little black notebook, and on the first page, written in Audrey's tidy handwriting, was a list of all the mistakes, cover-ups, and false charts she had seen Dr. Harrison make over the previous 3 months. Audrey had forwarded a copy of this list to the medical board before leaving. The sun rose over Oak Creek Memorial the next morning, but it brought no warmth to the emergency department. The pavement was slick and drab, reflecting the atmosphere within the hospital walls, as the rain had stopped. The Black Hawk extraction narrative had taken off like wildfire by the 7 a.m. Every orderly, janitor, and surgeon knew that Audrey Hale, the timid, shaky woman they called the Mouse, was actually a highly decorated naval captain who had operated on a senator's aorta in Trauma Bay 1. But the big storm was just beginning. In the break room was Brenda, the charge nurse. She had not slept, her eyes were rimmed with red, and her hands, usually so solid while holding a coffee cup, were quivering. She was gazing at something on the inexpensive laminate table. It was a tiny notepad, made of black moleskin. She had found it in Audrey's locker while emptying it out following Mr. Caldwell's orders. She had anticipated discovering sketches or perhaps a journal detailing her complaints over the bullying. She opened it to the first page again. August 14th. Dr. H ordered 50 mg Demoral for patient in bed 6. Severe opioid allergies are listed in the patient chart. I intervened and switched to Toradol. I took too long at the Pyxis machine, and Dr. H called me slow. Trauma 2. Toddler with greenstick fracture, September 2. Dr. H failed to examine distal pulses post-casting. When he was gone, I checked. Pulses slowed. Alerted ortho on call. Dr. H took credit for the catch. October 12th, Dr. H arrived for shift smelling of booze. Odor can be covered up with breath mints. During triage, erroneous behavior was observed. Brenda looked over the pages. There were dozens of entries, dates, times, patient ID numbers, specific doses. It was a forensic log of malpractice. It was a devastating manifest of Trent Harrison's irresponsibility. More significantly, it documented every instance in which Audrey discreetly intervened to protect a patient from his ego, all while taking his abuse. What do you read? Brenda jumped. In the doorway stood Dr. Harrison. He looked dreadful. His hair was unkempt, his eyes wild. He was formally suspended, but he had snuck back in to try and smooth things over with the staff before the board meeting. Nothing, Brenda said, trying to hide the book. Harrison lunged forward and snatched it from her hands. Give me that. He flipped it open. His face went from pale to a deep vein popping crimson as he read the entries. That little rat, Harrison hissed. She was spying on me. With a desperate, crazy smile on his face, he turned to Brenda and said, "This is nothing." She was recording everything. It's the rants of an insane woman, a frustrated worker. Right now, Brenda, we burn this. We dump it in the biohazard incinerator, and it never existed. Brenda gazed at him. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't see the gorgeous, pleasant doctor she had liked. She witnessed a man drowning and attempting to drag her down with him. Why not? Trent, she whispered, you can't burn it. He lost his temper. Will you prevent me? Brenda, I got you that promotion after everything I've done for you, because a fresh voice cut in from the corridor. The digital copy is already with us. Harrison whirled around. 3 people in dark suits stood there. In the center stood a woman with silver hair and a briefcase, Dr. Evelyn Price, the chair of the State Medical Licensing Board. The CEO, Mr. Caldwell, appeared to be at a funeral as he stood behind her. Dr. Harrison, Dr. Price stated, going into the break room. 3 days ago, Lieutenant Commander Hale mailed our office a scanned copy of that record. We were already crafting a case. Last night's event with Admiral Graham was merely the final nail in the coffin. Harrison backed up against the vending machine. It's a setup. She is dishonest. She has mental instability. She suffers from PTSD. We've read the charts cited in the notebook, Dr. Price remarked, her voice dry and clinical. The timestamps coincide. The pharmaceutical mistakes are consistent. Nurse Hale caught your blunders behind your back, which is the only reason your death rate isn't 3 times higher than the national norm. Price gestures to the 2 men behind her who are investigators. Dr. Harrison, until a proper hearing is held, you are hereby summarily suspended from practicing medicine. You must give up your badge and depart the area right away. You will be arrested for trespassing if you go back. You can't do this, Harrison yelled. I'm a star. I bring in millions for this facility. You are a liability, Caldwell continued, his voice chilly. And you're fired. Harrison gazed at Brenda. Inform them. Inform them that she is lying. Brenda glanced at Harrison's black notebook. She remembered Audrey, the woman who had rescued the Admiral and whom she had made fun of for trembling. Brenda, meanwhile, froze. Brenda inhaled deeply. She's not lying, Trent. On August 14th, I noticed that you missed the allergy. On October 12th, I witnessed you drinking. I was terrified of you, so I remained silent. You traitor. Harrison threw himself at her. Harrison was immediately taken by the arms by the security guards. He kicked and shouted as they took him along the hallway, the same hallway where he had humiliated Audrey so many times. The ER fell silent as they dragged him out the double doors. The reign of terror was over. Brenda fell into a chair and rested her head in her hands. She kept her work, but she knew she would never be the same. The mouse had shouted and the walls had come crumbling down. The grinder was battered by the San Diego sun 6 months later. The naval amphibious outpost Coronado's asphalt parade deck. Jet fuel and salt spray filled the air. Pay attention. The voice boomed across the deck, breaking through the sound of the crashing waves. While maintaining their plank stances, 30 Navy corpsman applicants fell to the ground. Sweat dripped down the blacktop. Despite their weariness, they dared not move. Commander Audrey Hale was coming down the line. She looked different. The ill-fitting scrubs were gone, replaced by the immaculate, tailored Type 3 camouflage uniform of the U.S. Navy. She had her hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. The shaking in her palms was gone, replaced by the coiled force of a warrior at ease. Do you feel worn out? Audrey exclaimed, walking past a young recruit who was shivering with effort. When you are downrange and your marine is bleeding out, you become fatigued. Does your fatigue matter to the enemy? No, I'm from Massachusetts. Nah. The class screamed in unison. Does the lack of coffee cause your heart to stop beating? No, I'm from Massachusetts. Then, she ordered, hold that line. She was hard on them, tougher than she had ever been on herself. However, they adored her for it. They were aware of her tale. They were aware that she was the ghostly nurse who had the ability to sew an artery in the dark. Recover, she yelled. The recruits jumped to their feet, standing at attention. Audrey adjusted her cover and turned to face the administrative building as the recruits sprinted off, saying, dismissed for chow. Be back in 0600. As she turned to face her meeting with the base commander, she noticed a black sedan parked on the tarmac. The rear door was opened by a driver wearing a dress uniform. An elderly man emerged. Even though he was using a cane, he was still moving. Even though he was dressed in a civilian suit, his demeanor was clear. It was Admiral Graham. Audrey froze. She hadn't seen him since that night in the storm when his guts were exposed to the air of Trauma Bay 1. Commander Rivers was standing next to him wearing aviator sunglasses and beaming. Audrey approached and gave a quick salute. "Admiral, Commander." Admiral Graham held out his hand and dismissed the salute. "Audrey, I told you you don't salute me. I'm retired now." Audrey gave him a handshake. It was a tight hold. "It's nice to see you standing, sir." "Thanks to you," Graham remarked. "The surgeons at Walter Reed said the stitching you did. They said it was art. They stated I would be in a box if I had waited 5 more minutes for a bypass machine." He gazed at the sea. "I was informed of the events that took place at Oak Creek." Audrey gave a small smile. "Sir, it seems like a lifetime ago." "I pulled some strings," Graham remarked, reaching inside his jacket pocket. "I was curious about the man's fate." "The physician." He gave Audrey a folded Oak Creek Gazette newspaper clipping. A local physician's license was revoked due to a carelessness controversy. Following a state board investigation into 34 instances of gross negligence, Dr. Trent Harrison, previously of Oak Creek Memorial, had his medical license permanently revoked. Several former patients are currently suing Harrison in civil court. Audrey looked at the headline. She had no emotion. Just a feeling of closure, no happiness, no validation. "Justice?" Graham remarked. "The wheel turns, although it does so slowly." "And the hospital?" Audrey inquired. The Admiral glanced at the seal and asked, "What about the staff, Rivers?" Rivers brought out a letter. "This came for you. Care of the Department of the Navy. It's from a Brenda Miller." Audrey took the letter. She hesitated, then tore it open. "Dear Audrey, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that things have changed. The board of directors dismissed Caldwell. Our emergency medicine chief has been replaced. She is compassionate. She pays attention. In the ER, we have a new policy. We refer to it as the HAIL protocol. Every nurse, regardless of seniority, has the ability to halt an operation if they feel patient safety is at risk. Without a second attending's approval, no doctor may override it. Audrey, you transformed us. We assumed you were weak because you were quiet. The loudest people are typically the most empty, something we were unaware of. I apologize for missing you. Brenda, I hope you're soaring." After folding the letter, Audrey placed it in her pocket. She glanced up at the Admiral and Rivers. She thought about the HAIL protocol. It has a pleasant ring. Rivers whispered, "Commander, you saved more than one life that night. You prevented the entire hospital from collapsing." In the distance, a siren let forth a cry. A base ambulance doing a drill. Audrey remained unflinching. She took a long intake of the salty air. Admiral Graham tapped his cane in response. What will happen to the Wraith next? Retirement teaching. Audrey stared at her recruits who were giggling as they walked to the mess hall. She examined her hands' scars. Wounds from life, labor, and conflict. "I guess I'm just getting started, sir," she continued. "These kids need to know that being a hero isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the one who brings the right tools." "Well," the Admiral remarked with a grin. Audrey saw them return to the car and said, "Carry on, Commander." She took one final glance at her hands as the vehicle sped off. They were steady. They were powerful. She wasn't a mouse. She never had been. She was a healer who had emerged from hell with a needle and thread. She faced the parade deck once more. Her voice reverberated off the buildings as she yelled, "Company, form up!" And as 30 young sailors hurried to obey the legend standing before them, Audrey Hale grinned. At last, she was at home. What a journey. Audrey Hale's narrative imparts a profound lesson about perception. from the shaking mouse in the ER corner to the ghost controlling a surgical theater. Because Audrey was silent and had scars, the Oak Creek Memorial staff mistook her anguish for weakness. They let their conceit to prevent them from seeing the greatness in front of them. Dr. Harrison learned the hard way that a title doesn't make you a leader, and a loud voice doesn't make you correct. Quiet, perceptive, and prepared to act when the sky falls are characteristics of true strength. Audrey proved that you don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes all you have to do is save the day. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. It truly aids in the channel's expansion. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that heroes are everywhere, often where we least expect them. And if you want more stories of justice, karma, and hidden heroes, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. I appreciate you watching. Mum.